Perfect. So just having the previous presentation, we talked about price and availability and how that needs to change. Well, I have the honor today, or challenged myself, to build on top of that. And the goal for me today is to give you an insight into another aspect of green procurement. We're talking about energy efficiency. Later on, we will talk about product carbon footprint with the new IMPA initiative. But before we're talking about product carbon footprint, there's also something very important. Now, fuel consumption is really a big savings potential when it comes to procurement. If we buy more energy efficient, this will have a direct impact on the savings, on the fuel consumption, and so on. I have the honor of being part of this, a new ISO standard called ISO 8933. And I just wanted today to share a few slides on how you, as a procurement professional and equipment manufacturer and supplier, can actually engage with this standard, how you can actually use it. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Rasmus. I am founder and CEO of ReFlow. We are a firm that specializes within climate data, environmental data. We connect the ship owner, the OEM, the chandler, the supplier, and everybody in the value stream with becoming more data-driven, making the right decisions based on data when it comes to climate and environment. I'm also a European Climate Pact ambassador, and I'm also part of the IMPA Safe Council. Great, let's dive into this new ISO standard. I just mentioned it's called 8933, and over the next 10 minutes, I'm gonna try and make this really entertaining, because a few presentations I've been to on standards have been super boring. So I have tried today to make it a little bit more entertaining. I will show an example, I will introduce the standard, and then we will dive in. And if you have any questions, just tag along. I'm not expecting you to be experts when we're done, but just know there is a standard for certain products that if you are a procurement professional, you can ask for this data. And if you are an OEM, you know that now you can actually supply objective data. Let's just dive in here. Let's see if this works. It did not work. So before we dive into the standard, where do we see successful companies? I'm going to call it companies, not ship owners or OEMs. I think companies in general. What we see is many companies out there, they start over here. And by the way, this is how it looks when you give a graphic designer too much time, then stuff is flying around. So we see a lot of companies starting over here on their climate journey. They're setting some goals, typically in the boardroom on strategic level. They're starting carbon footprint accounting. They're joining initiatives, and we also see some ship owners that are starting to work towards less fossil fuel. Now, where we really need to go to make an impact is on the other side. And the other side is all about understanding your emissions. So many companies start at a level where they know their emissions, but how do you actually get from knowledge to understanding? That is by breaking down your emissions using data. Know that there are something called scope 3, scope 1, scope 2, and what all these different parts of that data is actually built up. You could compare it to Lego bricks. Once you understand the Lego bricks, you can put them together in a different order, or perhaps even remove a few without breaking the whole thing. So once you know your emissions, you can actually start setting some real measurable goals. We all can set goals, but if you can't measure them, you don't really know if you meet them, right? Then you can start working through the ladder, as I put here, as we also heard in the previous presentation, circularity and so on. But I just want to have a word of caution. Some of these activities can actually be more damaging for the nature and for the environment if they're not done right. And they are not all scenarios where circularity is the right thing. We have provided data to some OEMs where they have circular remanufacturing, but the logistics involved with flying them around the world actually made it a lot cheaper just to buy new in terms of environmental impact. So this is also food for thought. So let's just look at the standard before I dive into it. So we actually started, I started as a representative from ReFlow in 2020 with an idea. We were looking at the new ambitions from some of the leading ship owners. They were switching to methanol and other things, other fuels. And we could see that energy efficiency is going to be really, really important because we need to spend less money if we are to make this transition, and that is by using less fuel, also new green fuels. They're more expensive. So we started in April 2020 with the idea. We pitched that to the, in this case, the Danish Shipowners Association and Danish Maritime, which was part of this as well. And then we submitted it in 21 to ISO, International Standard Organization, one of their technical committees within the maritime sector. They voted, and 12 countries voted yes, and that was enough to actually start the work on an ISO standard. And now in the end of 24, so in December 2024, the standard was published, and now we actually have an ISO standard. Super amazing. So let's dive in and figure out what this is all about. So the ISO standard is calling ships and marine technology energy efficiency, and it has part 1 and part 2. And one of them is all about products, and the other one is all about systems. And what that makes it possible to do is to look at the range of products. In this case, I will show an example on a centrifuge a little bit later, right? So now you actually have the ability to put in data that is defined in the standard, and you'll get a standardized output with an objective number on what is the energy efficiency of this centrifuge. So now, as a procurement professional, you have a way to compare and evaluate two products. You're no longer depending on a salesperson from an equipment manufacturer saying that now you can save 20% fuel by buying this one. Now you actually have a real number to compare with. So that's really the essence, really the breakdown of this new standard is now you can compare. And I'll try and bring you through one of these flows on how that actually works. So I mentioned part 1 and part 2. Part 1, I just took the index on the products page, and what you can see is something about pumps, fans. So everything that's actually using a lot of electricity on board will have this defined in the standard. So if you're a producer of fans or pumps or centrifuges or something like that, then you now are applicable. You can make these calculations and you can offer them also through the shipyards and so on. You're actually able to actually get this measurable number. There is also another part, because when we did the standard, we figured out that, yeah, one thing is the products, but they're also part of a larger system. So that could be a pressure or flow system, it could be heating, cooling system, and so on. Then the pump is of course important, but if you can't measure all the other stuff. So the other part of it is the systems, and here you're able to actually look at all these different systems and get a baseline. And the baseline is really good because that allows you on your existing fleet to dive into that. And this is where all the technical people can do that. And then they can go to the procurement people and say, we need this and that. And you can also make much easier return on investment calculations because you actually have reliable data in. Very good. We actually try and make a video. So here somebody's actually making a calculation. This is OEM. Making a calculation. So they're adding the data as it's defined in the ISO standard in this system. Something about the flow, the power of the engine, the efficiency, the gear efficiency, and so on. This is a centrifuge that they're making calculation on, just to show how easy it is. So now you made the calculation. That's how easy it is. You can now start comparing two products. And you can actually make a return on investment calculation super easily. And you'll be able to see what are the payback, when is this actually paid back in the business case, if you should buy it or not. It's our idea that this will be used by the ship owners as a baseline calculation, what they have right now. And then from all the equipment manufacturers, they're going to make these voluntary calculations and then sharing that in a verified manner with the ship owners. So in that way, you have a verified data going in and comparing to what you already have today. And in that way, you have also good ideas on where can you actually improve, what is the cost, what is the payback. And now you're actually making decisions based on data and not good intentions. And that's what it's all about. So let's try and look at the math here. So you have some different data going in. I won't bore you or myself with all this data. This is defined in the standard. Then it goes in. It will have an output. In this case, it says 130 kilowatt per cubic meter. That is the output. And then you are now able to categorize it compared to what you have today. In this case, we have made an example here on how it could look. I've just made something up today while I was listening to everybody saying, okay, let's make something where we can incorporate all that we have heard so far, right? We have heard something called EU Product Passport. What if we just make a label and put it down here? What if we take the IMF compliant carbon footprint, put it here? What if this one also contains the declaration of the hazardous materials inventory, right? Because we already have it when you make the calculation, you know if that's in there. And then we add the ISO-compliant energy efficiency rating on it. That will take care of a lot of stuff if you were a buyer, right? Because now you have all the data in one label and could actually make a decision. Of course, that's not how the world looks like today. We use many different systems and it's very fragmented. We'll talk about that later here in the panel when we talk about IMF as well. But this is an example on how a calculation could look like, and from there you can turn it into a business calculation using the standards. Don't try the QR code. Great. So putting it into another system, this is just an example on how a system could look like. This is ours. But we will have some ship owners in one end, we'll have some OEMs in the other end, or manufacturers. They make calculations, they share it with the ship owners through a platform or an API, and you'll start getting data out. Very good. So this is the afternoon session. How's it going? It's good? Yeah? Afternoon, yeah, I know. We need some cake and some different stuff. Great. Any questions in here? Do you, well, let me ask you guys a question. Do you see that an ISO standard can make a change here, or do you see that this is just another number you need to have streamlined and put it in there? Let me get some feedback from you. I'm not trying to sell anything. Jesper? Yeah, for those of you that couldn't hear what Jesper asked about, he said, well, what is very important here is the data input. Can we actually trust it? And are they willing as an OEM to actually add the data in there? Our talks with OEMs are saying, well, if we can sell more, of course we want to put it in there, right? So can we actually get some ship owners to buy the stuff if we do it, right? It's the chicken and the egg. What we have done so far is to make a partnership with a classification society. Because another thing we were very aware of very early on is you need to trust the data that goes in there. So one thing is it's in there, but if you can't trust the data, you need to have it verified somehow that this is actually the right data so you can compare it. That's the whole idea. So that we have done, and that is being tested right now. But it's our hope that this can actually turn into to another layer of data that can be part of some of the choices. We already see now that shipyards are quite interested in it because now they can actually make decisions in a different way, also on new builds. Good. Any other questions? Yeah? No? Yes? Who had one? Yeah? Yeah. So is it possible to compare? I think one of the biggest advantages with a standard is you can standardize the input and the output. So it's very much designed to be able to compare. Our biggest challenge now is that we have ship owners that are already using it to create baselines and they know what they have. But yes, now they want to engage in their procurement and their purchase scenario to get the OEMs to use it so they can compare it and actually put it in there. But what we are going to have in our flow will be that you can compare the already existing calculations. So even though you don't have the contact to an OEM, if they're publicized it, you'll be able to compare it and just see, is this better than what I have? And that can make it a little bit easier. Yeah, very good. Got a question down here? Yeah. So how do your question was, how do we actually ensure that the components inside the system, the calculations is verified? Was that? Yes. Can it only be done through classification societies? We have started off saying, yes, let's make and I think we are very strange if, all ship owners are used to having classification societies to absorb the risk about everything here, right? And as an OEM, it's super expensive. I also know the ship owners does, right? So are there any alternatives instead of purchasing a certificate from a classification society? I would say yes. It's all about making sure that whoever is using it trusts that source. There are European vetted, accredited verification companies out there, because what's happening isn't a specific maritime thing. It's a standard that you need to accredit. But we are definitely on our side opening up for others than just the classification societies. But we have to start somewhere. You could use TÜV Rheinland, for example, as they just need to have the international accredited stamp to have it verified. There are other sources out there. It's not specifically maritime. Yes. Yes, Jesper? That's a good thing about me. I just, I made this so I can just define who has AAA. So if anybody want to give me a drink afterwards, you can get AAA. No, joke aside, what the output of the standard makes is really a number. So the higher the number, the more efficient you are, or lower the number. It depends on the scale and the different product type, because each product type in the standard has a different output that makes sense for that product. So there is no unified measurable scale setup as we know from EU with the energy efficiency of refrigerators and so on. What I've added here was just for inspiration. So you will, if you're comparing different products, the one with the best score will have the highest rating, right? Yeah. So the intention with the standard is not to rank products, but is to make a number you can compare with. So when I added this rating, it's simply for illustration purposes, so you, as a person, can actually see that you can compare something. In the standard is not listed from G to AAA. But that is something we use as a consumer because the EU has made some scales on that. It could come later on, but it's not part of the standard today. So, but it makes good sense that how do we know if it's AAA? Is there a specific scale? And the answer is no. But it looks really good on a slide when you put it in. Good? Any other questions? No? Okay. I wish I could just hand out this standard for free, but apparently you have to buy it. So it's copyright protected. But I do know there is a EU case going on where you say if the EU is referring to a standard and you have to pay to actually get the standard and it's law, if you don't have access to the law, how would you know if you're complying? Why do you need to pay for it? So I know that the standardization agencies who are protecting these standards are starting to hand these out for free. So if you have contact to a local national standardization agency, just ask them very nicely and refer to the EU guidelines there. Then I'm very sure they will give it for free because they don't want to in trouble. Thank you so much for your time, and I just want to do some brief advertisement for the IMF panel we have after the break, a little bit later. So here we will catch up some of the other exciting opportunities within sustainability. Thank you very much for your time.